Hello and welcome to Elisa Maria Designs. Elisa Maria here. Before we begin today's chapter, I want to pause for a moment. One of the reasons Gaslight has remained such a powerful story for generations, I think it is because it shows us something deeply human. How our sense of reality can be challenged when someone slowly chips away at our confidence. Bella's struggle isn't just about mystery or suspense, it's about trust. Trust in oneself, trust in a memory, trust in truth. As we move into chapter 13, listen closely to the subtle shifts in the story because sometimes the smallest moments reveal the biggest truths. Let's continue. Gaslight, originally known as Angel Street by Patrick Hamilton, novelized by William Drummond. And here we go, chapter 13. And I should note that this chapter ends and we go into part 4 with chapter 14. Albert Booker soon found himself called upon to perform duties quite other than those of a manservant, duties for which he was compensated on a scale altogether more remunerative. It was, Mr. Ruff said, of the essence that Albert should appear to the outside world as the manservant of a retired gentleman, though he was at liberty to consider himself as the assistant, very private, of a private detective. It was a deprivation for Albert not to be able to boast to the world of the past achievements of his employer, but it was a compensation to be working with a great man. In most cases, Mr. Ruff elucidated the purpose of the investigation in sufficient detail for Albert Booker to know precisely what he had to discover. But in what Albert regarded as, the number 13 Angel Street case. His brief was terse and all-inclusive. I want to know what's going on there, Mr. Ruff said. Everything. Being a young man, more than averagely attractive and attracted to the opposite sex, Albert Booker favored the sapping technique. If you want to effect an entry, he proclaimed, as if this were a discovery which had not been made with the first domestic servant, the easiest way in is through the basement. To be paid for conducting flirtations with pretty maids was one of the pleasurable aspects of his duties. Nancy was a funny girl, a mixture of innocence and guile, of blatant vulgarity and naive good taste, of sensuality and shrewdness. He did not feel guilty of deceiving her because he knew that she would deceive him given the opportunity. And incidentally, Mr. Ruff appreciated that to keep Nancy interested, it was necessary to spend more than was usual for most girls of her station. Excursions to the fireworks at the Crystal Palace, the waxworks at Madame Tussaud's, to Hampton Court, Mascaline and Cook, and the Egyptian Hall in Piccadilly, and Moore and Burgess Negro minstrels at St. James Hall, to say nothing of such music halls as the Metropolitan in Edgware Road. Nancy enjoyed herself in almost any surroundings labeled as a pleasure resort. She liked an arm round her waist, a hand upon her breast, embraces more intimate up to, but excluding the ultimate. She was terrified of the possibility of having a baby, and in order to distract Bert Booker from the achievement of what she thought was his final aim, she would talk about the goings-on of Mr. Manningham and his wife, the details of which Albert Booker later related to the satisfaction and mounting excitement of his employer. Working though he was in the dark, Albert himself became more and more interested in this case. He even envisioned the possibility of prolonging the investigation of Nancy on his own behalf after the conclusions of the investigation on Mr. Ruff's, and at his own expense. So, waiting outside Whiteley's this sunny afternoon, which he had promised Nancy would, if the afternoon was fine, be an excursion by the steamboat from Chelsea Pier up the river to the botanical and pleasure gardens of Kew. He was looking forward to a lively combination of business and sport. But then he saw approaching down Angel Street a lovely who drove all thoughts of Nancy away. She was wearing a gray silk dress with matching mantle, a saucy bonnet of Brussels lace, topped with artificial roses and tied with ribbons beneath the chin, and she sported a lace and silk parasol. The dress was so catching, a thing that men turned to watch her in the street. The cut was demure, but the breast, so to speak, struggled against the bondage of the bodice. The bustle, which might have sat sedately upon another, was signaling like a semaphore. Detecting an invitation in the lovely's approach, Bert Booker cast duty aside and advanced, raising his bowler and bowed. The lovely, in her turn, bowed. "Excuse me, miss," Bert said. "I know that we have met, but where?" The lovely looked up, fluttering her eyelids. "I am not sure that I have the honor of the acquaintance." It was Nancy. She burst into a laugh. "You are a scream, Bert." "But didn't I take you in, Bert, just for a moment?" "You did, Nance. You did," Bert Booker said. "You know what I thought, Nance?" "No, Bert." Bert thought rapidly. "I thought," he said, "I thought that's the way Nance ought to be dressed all the time." "You didn't," Nancy said. "I bet you thought, that's not my Nance. It's another girl, didn't you?" "And you are," Bert said. "You're my other girl. And we'll take the omnibus to Chelsea Pier, and then we'll go to the botanical gardens, and I'll show you all the orchids in the tropical house, and I'll say, beat that if you can. Nance is more beautiful than you all." And you know what they'll say? "No, Bert. What'll they say?" "They won't say nothing," Bert said. "Orchids can't talk." The lovely in the gray dress and lace bonnet launched with her elbow a sharp jab between his ribs. It really was a lovely day. On the river steamer, Bert blew half a crown of a bottle of champagne, and they sat on the deck drinking it, watching Putney, Hammersmith, Barnes, Mortlake, and Chiswick glide by, splendid in the sunshine, while Nancy told the story of the dress and how sweet Mrs. Manningham was, even though she was going dotty and thought she heard noises upstairs, which was perhaps the only reason in the first place why she gave Nancy the dress. Nancy, in her cast-off finery, was so proud and really pretty that Bert did not have to remember when to lay his hand or on her side of her chair. "But the whole rig out?" he asked. "She really must be fond of you to give you this cape thing and the bonnet and the parasol." And then there came tumbling out the story of the puppy caught in the trap, and the way Mr. Manningham had forbidden her to leave the puppy alone with the mistress. And that's why they spent the whole morning together making over the dress. And Mrs. Manningham had said, "You'll look a fright if you go out with that black straw of yours. You must have the whole outfit." And she gave her bonnet, mantle, and parasol. "I am really sorry for her, losing her wits the way she is. I really am," she said. They wandered through Kew Gardens, but did not stay long in the plant house. "I don't like to think of them being shut up in those glass houses," she said. "They can't be happy." "But they would die if they were outside," Bert said. "They make me sweat anyway," Nancy answered. "I mean, perspire." They had tea in the pleasure grounds, and then, as the sun began to slant, they walked to the District Line station. "What do you make of him?" Bert asked. trying to slip his arm around Nancy's waist. "Him?" Nancy disentangled herself. "You know what, Bert?" Bert took her hand and shrugged his shoulders to show that he was not really interested in Mr. Manningham. "You know, Nance, you're one of nature's ladies." "What?" The pretty, complex, sensuous, romantic, vulgar, ambitious girl cried out from the shelter of Bella's outfit. "What do you mean?" Bert didn't precisely know. "You know, Nance," he said. Nancy took his arm and walked with him towards Kew Garden Station, her hip pressed so close to his that with her waggle it was a recurrent nudge. "You know what, Bert?" she said. "If he was free of her." Bert Booker said nothing. "She's too nice, Mrs. Manningham is." They went back to Charing Cross and had dinner at Gatti's in the Strand. In the course of the dinner, Nancy first became amorous, then hiccupy, and finally aggressive. "Don't think I'll invite you to dinner when I become the second Mrs. M," she said, "because I won't, Bert. I'm going to give you the boot, and I'm going to give Liz the boot, and we won't live in that house either. A nice little place in Pimlico on the borders of Belgravia. That's us." Bert was rather tipsy, too. He had drunk the major part of both bottles of wine. "I don't believe a word of it," Nancy said. "But you're beautiful in that dress." He leered across the table at her. "You'd be prettier out of it." Nancy pouted. "You're being naughty, Bert." "I mean it, Nance. But why should Manningham, with all his money—" "Has he got all that money?" Nancy asked. "It's her money. But if she was put away, I'd be Mrs. Manningham in common law." "But why should he have you?" "He's made for me," she boasted. Bert Booker took her back to Angel Street in a hansom cab. He made love to her, but he restrained his passion. "I don't believe it, what you say about Mr. Manningham," he taunted. "I think you've made it up just to make me jealous." It was then that Nancy told him about the clutch of hands over the rat trap beneath the stairs. The smugness of her recital made Bert angry. "Supposin' he wants you to help him get his wife put away. Of course, he might give your hand a squeeze. But all this talk about wife in common law, you're crazy, Nancy." But Nancy was not to be cheated of her dream. "You're just plain jealous, Bert Booker," she said. She crouched back in her side of the hansom until they reached number 13 Angel Street. Bert Booker told the cab driver to wait. He was afraid that Nancy might trip going down in the semi-darkness of the area steps. But into the penumbra of the gaslight appeared a figure, which proved to be Mr. Manningham. He was in high fettle. "Ah!" he cried. "Who is this gorgeous creature? And what a magnificent outfit!" "I seem to have seen that gown somewhere." He glanced down at the bosom, "but never so elegantly worn." "Well, I declare, it's Lady Nancy, with a saucy nose." He put his arm on her shoulder and turned to Bert. "Is she not the prettiest girl in Bayswater?" Bert Booker clenched his fist. If Mr. Manningham had been a stranger, he would have dealt with the situation, but he was Nancy's master. Nancy giggled. "It's all right, Bert. Don't worry, love." She blew him a kiss. When Mr. Manningham escorted her up the front stairs, elaborately taking her arm as if she were the lady of the house, instead of leaving her to enter by the area steps, she laughed, joining in the joke. The last that Albert Booker saw as the hansom drove off was Mr. Manningham with his arm around Nancy's waist, bending down to whisper something to her, and Nancy looking up into his bearded face. 3/4 of an hour later, Albert Booker had finished his verbal report and 3 fingers of Mr. Ruff's whiskey in seltzer water. His employer had heard him mostly in silence, though when Booker mentioned Mrs. Manningham's fears about noises which she imagined coming from the upper floor, he drew his breath. Ah, that's very interesting indeed. When he had finished, Albert ventured to suggest that his investigation might be more fruitful if he knew what he was supposed to be looking for. Mr. Ruff replenished his own glass generously and his assistant's with moderation. You hold your liquor well, my boy, but remember the morning after. Then he filled his curved briar with his nighttime blend. He was a connoisseur who did not smoke just tobacco, but had different mixtures, smoked in different pipes, each of which he declared had properties as distinct as the blends of whiskey. He drew on the pipe until the tobacco was burning well, and then he said, You've done well, as it is, my boy. I've kept you in the dark deliberately, for a number of reasons. For one, before you were born, but not, perhaps, before you were thought of. Number 13 Angel Street was the scene of a peculiarly horrible crime. What that crime was, I do not propose to tell you, nor do I want you going down to Printing House Square to search through the files of the Times. Enough to say that the criminal was never found, that a large sum of money was paid out by the insurance company, and that the police finally abandoned the case. I had my own theories at the time, but I was still a junior. I was given no opportunity for pursuing them. Some months ago, something happened which caused me to revive my interest in that long-forgotten case. I pursued my inquiries through you and through other channels. I did not tell you what my theories and suspicions were because I did not want to color your thoughts. By last week, I had, in my view, enough evidence to consult my old friend, Sir George. As I feared, he was reluctant to reopen a case which had, in its day, caused public outcry, but was now forgotten. He demanded cast iron proof, and rightly so. But at least I secured his promise that once given that proof, the force would move immediately into action. That is how matters stood until this evening, or perhaps it would be more accurate to say, until this morning. I had waited 20 years, and I thought that I could wait as many days or even weeks in order to make certain of my man. Mr. Ruff paused to refresh himself with whiskey. Then he leaned forward and wagged his pipe at Albert Booker. But what you have told me, my boy, makes me realize that time is not on our side. Now, this is what I want you to do. I want you, if you can, without Nancy's knowledge, to ask Elizabeth to call on me. Find out her partialities, macaroons or muffins, then promise them. Chapter. Find out her partialities, macaroons or muffins, then promise them. Okay, let's get into the commentary, shall we? Because the next chapter starts with chapter 4, part 4, chapter 14. I'm so excited. What makes chapter 13 so fascinating is that for the first time in the story, we step outside the house at 13 Angel Street and we begin to see the machinery of investigation quietly turning into the background. Up until now, we have mostly experienced the world through Bella. And the chapter where Bella was missing was really fascinating. It was a great chapter. But now we're looking at Bella again being missing. We're looking at the home, kind of like peering in through the window. We've mostly experienced the world through Bella, through her confusion, through her fear, and her growing sense that something is not right inside her own home. Here, Patrick Hamilton introduces a new set of eyes. And it's really important, chapter 13. I think I'm going to do a separate video on this, about the trick that Patrick Hamilton used in this chapter that I see with other kind of suspense writing. Here he introduces a new set of eyes, and it's Albert Booker. Booker is young, he's confident. I wouldn't say that he was vain. He's just really proud of the way, he's looking at, admiring himself in the window of Whiteley's. He's young. He's 20 years old. He's pleased with his bowler hat and his spats. He's feeling prosperous at only 20. I'm sure he's walking around with his chest puffed out and his posture straight. Yet beneath that polished appearance lies something more important to the story. He is part of a quiet investigation led by his employer, who is a retired detective, Mr. Ruff. And Ruff refuses to reveal too much. He hires him as a manservant, and to the outside world, he should look like a manservant. He wants one thing above all else. He wants information. Everything that is happening inside number 13 Angel Street, without really even knowing why or what he's looking for. And so Booker takes the path that investigators often take, through servants' quarters, through the basement. That's what he meant. The easiest way is through the basement. Through conversation and flirtation with Nancy. He knows that Nancy, the maid, moves freely between the maid quarters and the household above. And Nancy herself, boy, what a fascinating character. She's, as described, she's playful, bold, naive. I would say she was a little bit ambitious. I'd say she's greatly ambitious, because she's already imagining herself as the future Mrs. Manningham. After a single moment of attention from her employer, yet that he forgot. Remember? She was kind of embarrassed to see him after that little flirtation, but he just went about like nothing happened. And here's where that little moment that I had told you to be aware of before we started the chapter. For all her gossiping, buried inside her gossip, she's talking about Mrs. Manningham. Oh, she's a little dotty. She thinks she hears noises upstairs. She casually revealed something extremely important. Bella hears noises upstairs. That single detail is what makes Mr. Ruff, who was listening to Mr. Booker, go on and on rather quietly over, what are they drinking, scotch or whiskey? That little tidbit makes him stand up and listen. Now he's like, oh, that's a very, very interesting. Bella's hearing noises upstairs above her, above her bedroom. Because Ruff knows something that no one else in the story knows or understands. And that is that years before Bella ever set foot in that house, there was a murder there. And it was a murder that was never solved. And suddenly, those strange noises from the upper floor of Angel Street take on an entirely different meaning. It widens the story. We move from Bella's inner world to the outside investigation. So I think that the really important parts was that it introduces also detective framework that the audience now recognizes, a truth beginning to surface. But what is it? Nancy's gossip becomes crucial evidence. Mr. Ruff's reaction to the noises signal to the reader that Bella may not be imagining things after all. That moment is the first real crack in Manningham's control of the narrative. And so the mystery of Angel Street deepens. What Bella hears in the quiet of the house may not be imagination at all, but the echo of something that happened long before she ever arrived. I am going to go right into part 4, my lovelies, my lovely readers. And that is chapter 14. I wonder where we're going to be. We're going to be inside the house, outside the house. But there was something in the structure of chapter 13 that Patrick Hamilton, as a writer, very important. And I think what I'm going to do, I don't know if I'm going to put that at the end of chapter 14 or just do another video, or maybe I'll make this like a member moment. I don't know, but I recognized it right away. I've seen it a lot with Hitchcock. So let's get into chapter 14 because we only have 19 chapters here and I have quite a bit of time left. So let's go. Part 4, chapter 14. I see that you have a letter from York, my dear, observed Mr. Manningham at breakfast the next morning. Are you not going to open it? Bella had hidden it beneath her side plate, but it had not escaped her husband's notice. She cursed herself for her stupidity. If only she had sliced the envelope open and then offered to read it to him, Jack would have said coldly. I think I can spare myself Mrs. Jamieson's newsy missives. As it was, his suspicions were aroused. Bella pretended not to have heard, but her involuntary blushing gave her away. It would be sad if to your other infirmities was added deafness, Mr. Manningham turned to Nancy. Have you found, Nancy, that Mrs. Manningham does not hear what you say to her? There was a twinkle in his eyes, though his voice sounded gravely solicitous. I heard very well what you said, Bella answered. But the reading of correspondence at the breakfast table is not the most sociable way of behaving. I detect a reproof to the busy man of affairs, her husband said, contriving to be as acidulous to his wife as he was, at the same time affable to the undermaid. Yet in all the years of our marriage, I do not remember your having voiced that objection before. We live and learn. Who can say that marriage becomes monotonous when suddenly thousands of mornings after their blissful wedding day, having opened tens of thousands of letters at the breakfast table in the interim, a wife can inform her husband that he has been unsociable? Must we make such a mountain out of a molehill? Entreated Bella. Indeed, Manningham persisted, I am merely mending my ways. I am resisting the temptation of opening these fascinating requests from tradesmen for prompt payment, these heart-rendering appeals to contribute to charities for distressed gentlewomen, ragged schools, or the Royal Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, to which I should merely reply that this last-named charity should begin at home. Instead, I am being conversational in the most sociable way I know, and perhaps you will be sociable while I eat my breakfast. Bella sipped her tea. Her appetite, such it had been, was destroyed by the play of his vindictive wit. She would like to have risen and gone to her bedroom, as she would have done if there had been no servant present. But appearances had to be kept up, or rather, perhaps, the appearance of keeping appearances up. It could not be, I suppose, asked Manningham, after a bout of thorough mastication, that the letter which you have decided it would be unsociable to open contains matters which you would prefer your husband not see? From Mrs. Jameson? Bella pretended to laugh. Mrs. Jameson never wrote a word you deign to read. Having mended my manners, then, dear girl, let me prove it by deigning. He stretched out his hand and snapped the fingers impatiently. Let me read it to you. It could be a social substitute for conversation. Oh, I swear to God, I have to stop here for a minute. This woman, no wonder why she's being driven mad. Mr. Manningham had so overstepped the boundaries of what was decorous before a servant that Bella found a new realm of courage. I do not ask my husband if I can read his correspondence. Indeed, I did not dream until this morning that it consisted in donning letters from tradespeople. But if my husband insists on the conjugal right of being privy to my correspondence, at least I claim the right to read the letter first. It is bulky, Mr. Manningham said. Your bills may be thin, Bella said, slitting the envelope, but they seem many, she nodded. You have my license to be unsociable. She unfolded the wad of paper, scrawled so large and indefinite that it would have been difficult to decipher even if Mrs. Jameson had not then economized by writing over what she had previously written at right angles. Bella began to read. Dear Bella, I venture to call you that, not Mrs. Manningham, because this is how I think of you, dear Bella, even if you cannot yet think of me as Minty. Mr. J and I hold you constantly in our prayers, not just night and morning, but during the day. It is not for us to judge. Judge not, and ye shall not be judged. Matthew 7, verse 1. But it is clear to Mr. J and me that you are in dire need of God's guidance and his word. For what knowest thou, O wife, whether thou shalt save thy husband? Or how thou'st know, O man, whether thou shalt save thy wife? 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 16. It greatly distressed us, dear Bella, that you and Mr. Manningham had not the blessing of finding Jesus, the Savior and Redeemer of us all. But in the good book you will find, remember, 1 Peter 3, verse 1 and 2. Likewise, you wives, be in subjection to your own husbands, that if any obey not the word, they may also, without the word, be won by the conversation of the wives, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear. Perhaps this adversity is a blessing in disguise to bring you both closer to him. Meditate on this, please, dear. There is at the great city temple in Holborn Viaduct Dr. Joseph Parker, who, through a congregationalist, Mr. J thinks might do much for you, since he is very forthright man and yet rooted in the Holy Scriptures. However puzzled you may be, remember that God moves in mysterious ways. Mr. J joins with me to wish you and Mr. M the happy outcome of your distress. Ever yours, affectionately, in our Lord, Araminto Jameson, and in parentheses, Minty. It is difficult to describe the problem which Bella had in deciphering the letter under the scrutiny of her husband, or of the relief that her cry for help had been met by a response so conventional. Well, asked her husband. Bella turned to Nancy. Could you pass this to Mr. Manningham? Perhaps he can make more of it than I can. At least he is anxious to. Jack looked at the letter, the march and countermarch of the gross, illegible words across the pages. He did not trouble to scrutinize fully. He had already made his offensive by attacking her secrecy and trying to hide it under her side plate. I can't understand why you find this so puzzling, my dear, he said. I don't know what 2, 4, and 5 is, but 1 Peter 3, 1 and 2 is surely divinely inspired. Likewise, ye wives, be in subjection to your husbands, that if any obey not the word, they may also without the word be won by the conversation of the wives. Yet, while they behold your chaste conversation coupled with fear, I hope, my dear, that you'll couple your chaste conversation with fear. With a flash of her old spirit, she answered, I have learned to couple my fear with chaste conversation. He did not hear what she said. Where's your fob watch? He asked with sudden interest. At that moment, she realized that the whole of the scene which he had built up so far during breakfast had been merely a diversion to prepare for the main attack. I don't know, she said. To assume that this was the main attack was wrong. It might just be another feat, to be followed by a third, a fourth, a fifth. Don't you think that we have finished with breakfast? She asked. I agree, he said, rising. But not our business. That watch belonged to someone very close to me. I hope that you have not mislaid it. As they went upstairs to the drawing room, Bella recognized that in wanting to be rid of the humiliation witness of the undermaid, she had lost her only independent testimony. Anything they said alone was his word against hers, and his was the more convincing because he wasn't bound by truth. She felt half persuaded to be in subjection to her husband because to be in opposition would end in the same insanity. But after a longer, more debilitating struggle, it would be better to withdraw into an asylum intact, more or less, rather than utterly shattered. Please sit down, Jack said. Bella knew that she ought to stand, but even if she did, her husband would tower above her. So she chose the lowest chair in order to relax the furthest away from his aggression. If only she could respect him as an adversary. She felt that she might preserve some vital root which could put up new shoots of love. But he was an overweight, middle-aged bully whom she was contracted in marriage to love, honor, and obey. As a wife, she ought to want to defend him from himself, but as a woman, she only wanted to defend herself from him. I'm getting tired of your tricks, Jack, she said. I went down to the bathroom, leaving my watch as usual beside my bed. I came back and it was gone. You have given me the great liberty of a bolt inside my door, but not a key. I would like one. Or rather, I would prefer a new lock, of which I have the only key. He lit his after-breakfast cheroot, so that if you are taken ill, we shall be forced to break down the door. I shan't be taken ill. He laughed. Forgive me, my dear, but already you are not well, or so it appeared to me. Dr. Frost must wait on you today. I would not have you think that I am trying to persuade you into illness any more than into an illusion of good health. Meanwhile, where is that watch? She saw him flagging like an actor whose lines, though not forgotten, had become meaningless. And with a sudden sharpness, she called, Jack! What? He was startled out of his routine. Something is wrong, she said. What is it? You should tell me. I am your wife, for better or worse. It seemed to Bella for a moment he was poised in some indecision, that this gigantic, looming husband might shrink into a scared child, weeping at her knee. Jack looked at her, but instead of finding someone whose love encompassed everything, he saw a woman almost frightened out of her wits. You are very clever, crazy though you may be. Where is that watch? His face became ugly. Jack, she said, thinking of his magnificence when he released her from the bondage of Holly Place and the sadness of his coarsening. Darling, she caught a response from that word which had not been used for years. The watch. You gave it to me, didn't you? Of course I did. Then does it matter? If I don't mind that it cannot be found at the moment, is it so important? He looked pained. It is not, of course, the watch that matters. It is the mislaying of it, and then the denial of responsibility, or rather the mental decline, of which these are only two of many symptoms. You would not have me be, I hope, so unfeeling a husband as to stand idly by, watching this progressive deterioration. Yet you can be so unfeeling as to deny me the companionship of Cerberus. What better example could there be, he exclaimed, of the manner in which your poor, sick brain takes the most innocent of actions and invests it with a diabolical intent? No one could have greater concern than me for that poor little dog, so crazily named. Certainly not you, my girl. If it had been you that released him from that trap, if you had seen how near he had come to losing his paw, and we still do not know whether sepsis may not set in. Nancy told me that the vet was not sanguine, though today's report, pray God, may be more hopeful if, as I say, you had seen that poor, dumb creature's plight. You would have vowed, as I did, that never must the risk be run of repetition of such an incident. I thought at first that perhaps it would be best to lodge him in some kennels against his recovery and then find him a good home. But then, out of consideration for you, my girl, I assure you, purely out of consideration, I thought, no. Let the dog remain at number 13, protected by the servants. Whatever your motives, I can think of no course better calculated to humiliate and torment me. It seemed as if this was precisely what her husband had wanted to provoke her into saying. His response was immediate. That can soon be remedied, my girl, he said. I shall arrange for his accommodation in kennels with immediate dispatch. If you would only tell me when I have unwittingly, but with the best will in the world, caused you distress, you should know that I will always make other dispositions. I shall see Mr. Grass myself. No, no. However humiliating Jack's ban was, why Cerberus was in the house, there were ways and means of being with him. On Nancy's half-day out, Bella had spent the whole afternoon helping Elizabeth with the work that Nancy should have done if it had not been for the sewing lesson. No word was spoken about the puppy, but they had both known that this was the secret reason. You must not do that, Jack. Mr. Manningham opened his eyes wide with astonishment. But this is unbelievable. At one moment you accuse me of deliberately humiliating and tormenting you by keeping the puppy in the house. And in the next breath, you are begging me to let him stay. This is carrying feminine indecision to the point of mental instability. Which would you have me do, in the name of goodness? Bella did not answer. She could not. The control which she had exercised upon herself snapped, and once she began to weep, she could not stop. Her husband had at least the delicacy not to attempt to staunch the tears which he had provoked. If he had so much as touched her, she would have screamed the house down. Instead, he left the room, closing the door softly behind him. He must have spoken to Elizabeth on the way out, because immediately after the front door slammed, the cook came quietly into the room. She stood for some time at a few paces' distance. Then she came over and put a hand on the back of Mrs. Manningham's neck as she sat with her head in her hands. "Mr. Manningham's gone to fetch Dr. Frost, madam," she said. "Would you feel better in bed?" Bella shook her head and with one hand waved for her to go away. When Nancy came back from Mr. Grass, she brought Kerberos up to Bella. Ridiculous though it might sound, the puppy was the only creature on earth that gave her the will to continue living. Without his dependence and affection, there was nothing that would have stopped her going up to her bedroom and flinging herself out of the window, except perhaps the fear that she could not jump far enough to avoid the balcony below and would survive, so maimed that she could not even attempt to do away with herself again. "Mr. Grass says Kerberos is doing nicely," Nancy said, "and bring him back in 3 days' time, and then maybe the splints will come off." Bella ran her hands tenderly through the puppy's curly hair, holding her head back, laughing despite her recent tears at the lavish licking of her face, the scrambling of his front paws, bound and free, about her chest. "Shall I leave him with you, ma'am?" Nancy asked. The girl's suggestion was, Bella thought, spontaneous, but it might not be. If it ever came to a choice of loyalties between her and Jack, Nancy would choose Jack, because he was a man, and poor Nancy did not know he was diseased. Bella wondered whether she could warn Nancy, and Elizabeth too, that her husband was diseased. They ran some risk, drinking from a chipped glass, for example. But then they both might give notice to leave, or worse still, Nancy might ask Jack if it were true, as he made some advances to her. He was bound to do so sooner or later, if he hadn't done so already. That risk was too great. So was the risk of accepting Nancy's suggestion. Supposing that Jack returned, bringing Dr. Frost with him, and she was trapped upstairs alone with Kerberos. It was appalling, the bondage of married women in Imperial Britain in this so-called century of progress. If Bella went to any stranger for advice, it would be not to the forthright Dr. Parker, but to some courageous woman, such as Mrs. Annie Besant, the social reformer. "No, Nancy," Bella said, "we must accept Mr. Manningham's decision, whatever they may be. But let us both go down to the kitchen, as I must wait for Dr. Frost. Will you oblige me by doing the shopping? With Elizabeth, I shall compile the list for you." So, with a little guile, Bella had Kerberos to herself until Dr. Frost arrived. By that time, with aid of a flannel and much cold water, she had composed the ravages to her face caused by weeping. She had also devised a campaign to contain the doctor. When the doorbell rang, Bella cleaning the silver with Goddard's plate powder, she was wearing an apron and her sleeves were rolled up. She allowed Elizabeth to open the front door, but she arrived from below stairs while the doctor was still in the hall. Kerberos followed at her heels. Dr. Frost looked at her in some surprise. The ailing ladies he was used to visit reclined usually in beds or on couches. "Oh, I'm sorry," Bella said. "I had no idea when you would visit. So I have been deputizing for the maid, whom I had to send abroad to do my shopping." She undid her apron strings. "Perhaps you would show Dr. Frost into the dining room, Elizabeth." She rolled down her sleeves while Dr. Frost disappeared from view. Then she tidied her hair in the looking glass and gave Kerberos an exciting caress that he came bounding into the dining room after her. "What a charming puppy," Dr. Frost said. "But what's he done to his paw?" "Didn't Mr. Manningham tell you?" Bella said. "Well, it doesn't matter." She turned to Elizabeth. "Do you think Mr. Manningham would trust Dr. Frost to see that Kerberos does not come to any harm? Or should I ask you, Dr. Frost?" Dr. Frost was a dog lover. "I shouldn't have thought the little fellow would have come to harm with either of us," he said. "Certainly he's devoted to you." "I'm interested to hear you say that, Doctor," Bella said. "Down, Kerberos, down." She patted the hearth rug. "Down, boy." The puppy was by no means fully trained, but he settled onto the rug and curled up. "I can see you like dogs, Doctor. Man's best friend." At this point, she realized later she should have abandoned the conversation about dogs, but she couldn't. The whole of her life centered on this puppy. "Then you can understand," she said. "Thank God for that." She leaned forward and began to pour out all that had happened since the ghastly morning after Kerberos was caught in the trap. She knew that her muscles were becoming tense. Her fists were clutched white over her knuckles. She hammered on the dining room table, and her eyes began to blink nervously. Dr. Frost was a normal dog lover who threw sticks into the round pond and backed away from the shower of spray when his retrieving best friend dropped them on the grass and then shook the water from its coat. He was at first alerted as a doctor and then became alarmed by the passion with which Bella spoke about Kerberos and her husband. A dog was only a dog after all, while a husband belonged to a higher order of creation. When he was called on to follow a story of extreme complexity about who came in when, what doors were locked and what open, bottles of wine fetched from the cellar, which the next morning were found to still be there, he withdrew his attention. He recalled the good doctor who had taught him at Guy's. "Listen first, gentlemen, to the tone of the voice of the patient. Diagnostically, it will tell you, in 9 cases out of 10, if not in 99 out of 100, more than a notion of the patient's report of symptoms. Eavesdrop on the undertones." With Mrs. Manningham, there were overtones, quite recognizably, of acute hysteria coupled with paranoid delusions. The symptoms were similar to those of her first collapse, complicated by the intrusion of the puppy, of course, a substitute for the baby the poor woman had lost. Nor was it strange that she should put on the husband the blame for the social disease. Though, as a sensitive woman, of course, she did not mention this, it clearly colored the whole of her attitude toward Manningham. "You must not distress yourself unduly about the puppy, Mrs. Manningham," he said. "I'll have a word with Mr. Manningham and recommend him to reconsider. But I do think you need a tonic, which I will make up in my dispensary and have it sent round." "When you say tonic, you really mean sedative," Bella said. "I hope that you do not want to reduce me to the state of stupefaction you achieved before." "Dear me, no," Dr. Forrest reassured her, reflecting that he could achieve a similar state of sedation by a medicine different in appearance. Chapter. I was jotting down a few notes while we were reading through this chapter because I think this is one of the most psychologically intense chapters of this entire play. And Hamilton, in chapter 14, the beginning of part 4, is where the manipulation becomes like an open warfare. And Hamilton is showing us how gaslighting actually works step by step. So let me just break this down for you. The breakfast table is like psychological theater. It's not a scene of normal conversation. It is, as Belle realizes, it's the performance. He's doing 3 things at once, Manningham. He's publicly humiliating her. He is feigning normalcy, and he's creating a witness. So Nancy is not only, the witness to this public humiliation. When he turns to Nancy and says that Bella might be going deaf, is she deaf when you talk to her? Does she hear you? Oh my God. He is doing something extremely strategic. He is planning a narrative. He wants the servants to believe Bella is unstable. Why? Because later, when Bella protests, the servants have already seen evidence of her odd behavior. And this is classic control. We also see these little pockets where Bella is returning to herself. Bella was a strong individual. She based the foundation of everything on the gods and goddesses of Greek mythology. But you start to see little pockets of her courage appear. And that's what is important that happens here. You start to see Bella pushing back a little bit, with, so hitting him sarcastically back. Reading correspondence at the breakfast table is not a social way of behaving. Your bills may be thin, but they are many. Those moments show that Bella is starting to think clearly again. And that's why Manningham escalates. I keep going back to something that John said early on. He's playing 3D chess and she's playing checkers. It's really so heartbreaking to see her have these pockets of courage. And when she exercises them, it's like, you're going to be punished for that. This man is sick. He's sick. He is diseased, which was also pointed out, and not just from the syphilis. He is a diseased man. Then we have the letter from Minty. And the letter serves as a very deliberate purpose in this story because Bella does have outside support, outside moral support. She is the religious authority. And she's also this idea of endurance, of how to, be strong, meditate on these passages of scripture that I have included in this letter for you. But Manningham, he's going to twist this immediately. He selects the scripture, of course he does, about wives submitting themselves to their husband. And this is manipulation at a very high level because he is using religion, he is using social expectations, and he's using his authority to reinforce his control. Bella's reply, though, I don't know if I chuckled during this. It was brilliant. I learned to couple my fear with chaste conversation. That line is so subtle, but powerful. She is refusing the meaning he's trying to impose. And then she comes to realize that what this whole morning is about, the watch accusation. She realizes that the entire breakfast conversation is a diversion. The letter is a diversion. The teasing, the sarcasm, it's all stage setting for the accusation. This is exactly the way psychological abusers manipulate it. They take you off guard. You think that you're keeping up with them. Again, 3D chess. But it's not about the bills, the letter. It's not about the flirting with Nancy at the table. Oh, that's just the staging. And how they operate is to create confusion first and then strike. I think Bella asking for a private key is huge. The moment something is changing in her, I don't really think, maybe not changing, but it's the moment that she's becoming outspoken about it. Because there's, is he really doing this? Maybe it is me, because you just can't believe that anybody could be this manipulative. to such a beautiful, charming, loyal wife. He can't really be this mean and sadistic. The man that she married that called her darling, um, and gave her these beautiful gifts. So I think that Bella is beginning to recognize that she is not safe because her husband is not safe. And you could tell in the reading, he's being thrown off balance because for the first time, I believe it's the first time, Bella is trying to create a boundary. So Manningham now deploys his next weapon, Kerberos. That puppy represents Bella's affection and comfort. And Kerberos, as we know, was the dog in Greek mythology with 3 heads that represent the past, the present, and the future. So he threatens the dog. Because I'm bringing that up again about Kerberos's name, is because he said to her, this ridiculous name that you gave this dog, because he's uneducated. He doesn't know why, when he gave her, how about when he gave her the cameo, and she was like, how did you know? It's Persephone, in the cornucopia. And he doesn't know who Persephone is. He has no idea. Same way he doesn't know who Kerberos is. So he threatens the dog. It's another classic control tactic. When you cannot control the person directly, you threaten something that they love. And I will tell you, I really felt like I was going to vomit during this reading. I just, sorry for being so harsh, but it's been a very emotional moment for me with any of my animals, but especially Mr. Honor, because I had him the longest. And he was like Kerberos. He was always under my feet. He was always beside me, next to me, went with me everywhere. And, recently, for those of you that know Ditzy from Ditzy's Diamond Den, and she made me this beautiful tray, but she also just lost her dog yesterday. And she's going through this grief of a dog she's had probably from when he was a puppy. I don't know that much about her dog, but I know I'm a dog lover, and I know that pain of losing your little fur baby. So he's going to threaten something that she loves. And he's already proved that he is capable of cruelty when the puppy was injured. And like the coward that he is, or the manipulator that he is, or the void of any emotion at all, he's void of love. He's void of it. Doesn't know how to give it. He's never experienced it. He's going to use the doctor because the doctor is authority, and authority, as we know, is a weapon. And I think Dr. Frost is one of the most tragic characters in this story because he thinks he is helping. But what he is actually doing, and we know this, is that he is reinforcing this abuse. Notice what he does. Instead of examining the facts or asking about these facts, he evaluates Bella's tone of voice, which I'm not saying is wrong, but he interprets emotion as pathology. Emotions are not tools of cognition, but he interprets emotion as pathology. He sees her frustration, he sees her fear, he sees her desperation, and he labels it as hysteria. And this was extremely common in Victorian medicine. Women were often diagnosed with hysteria simply for expressing distress. And Hamilton is very intentional in criticizing that system. And the cruel irony is that Dr. Frost believes Bella's distress proves that she is unstable. But the audience knows, we know, that her distress is completely rational. She's being manipulated. She's being isolated. She's being threatened. I mean, the woman said that she would want to throw herself out a window if the balcony wasn't there, because she'd be maimed probably, and then she would be too um, uh, 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 disabled to try it again and kill herself again. Oh my God, this is horrible. I think, because I did want to go into chapter 13 a little bit, and I'm probably going to add a little bit more to this diamond painting session, just so I can go over chapter 13 with you guys here. And maybe what I want to do is go over that first. But I think that why part 4 began here, and why Patrick Hamilton divided the play this way, was for a reason. Because in the beginning, the parts 1 through 3 is to establish the illusion, and then part 4 is the collapse of that illusion. The tension now is we're starting to get some answers. Melissa had left a comment on, I think it was chapter 9 and 10, where she said, when is this going to start? How many chapters are left? When are we going to start to come to a conclusion here as to what is really going on? And she had mentioned, well, I'm not going to say, I'm going to leave you guys to a little suspense here. But you can go back and read Melissa's comment if you want, on chapter 9 and 10, I think it is. But we're starting to get some I think some answers, or we're starting to see the collapse of the illusion, because Bella is resisting. She's questioning. She's asking the lock on the door. She's defending herself. But the forces against her are extremely strong. She knows if it's between her and Mr. Manningham, even though she gave Nancy this beautiful dress and she walked around like a queen, she's going to pick Manningham. There was something else about Kerberos, because I'm just so emotionally exhausted about the dog. Because if anyone would have tried, and anyone that has any kind of animal, not just a dog, would try and hurt your precious pet, believe me. I don't know what I don't know what I would have done at that breakfast table had he threatened my dog. But then again, I'm not living in Victorian times. But not only is Kerberos the three-headed dog in Greek mythology, not only does he represent the past, present, and future, each head represents one of each, the past, present, and future, but Kerberos in mythology also guards the gates to the underworld. No one leaves, no one gets in. And Hamilton is hinting that this house, Angel Street, is itself a kind of psychological underworld that Bella is trapped inside. And the dog, I hope, may end up playing a symbolic role to exposing the truth. And I want to investigate that a little bit, about Manningham's behavior pattern, especially, with the story of gaslighting. So there were like a couple of, I was jotting down information that I wanted to put into my commentary, but then I was also branching off into other things. So I already have like 2 more commentaries that I want to add here, and maybe I'll just do them separately. And then if you feel like you want to explore a little bit deeper, that you will. Also, something else that disturbed me with Dr. Frost was the tonic. He suggests a tonic to Bella, and immediately she says, "You mean a sedative?" And that tells us something crucial, that Bella remembers what happens before. She has already experienced being drugged into passivity or being stupefied. And her instinctive response is fear. Could you imagine? Imagine someone coming in your room and just giving you an injection, and you're just starting to come to your senses, but oh no, you're being sedated again. What the hell was going on at that time when she was sedated? What was he doing, this other one, during this time? What was he doing? I wonder if we're going to find out. Um, but Dr. Frost says something that was really, really troubling, and I don't know that I really grasped the what he meant. He tells her, no, no, I'm not going to, give you anything that's going to do, put you out like that. But that he could achieve a similar result with another medicine. In other words, a different bottle, but the same outcome. What he wants is not necessarily to heal Bella. He just wants to calm her behavior. And that distinction matters enormously because Dr. Frost believes, I think, that he is treating hysteria and emotional agitation and a nervous collapse, because they were common diagnoses for women in the 1800s. They believed that the goal was to make the woman, I'm saying woman, I shouldn't say patient, but I'm going to say woman here, quieter, calmer, less emotional. So sedation was often the treatment. But what is actually happening, and I think the audience notices something that Dr. Frost does not, is that Bella is not hysterical. She is reacting to psychological abuse. So the sedative would effectively dull her instincts, reduce her resistance, and it's going to make her easier to control. And this is something that would help Manningham enormously. My throat feels like it's closing because it's such a terrifying irony. Ugh. I applaud Hamilton's subtle criticism of the medical system of that time because doctors often sided with husbands. If a woman protested too strongly or probably even persisted, it was interpreted as nerves, again, hysteria, instability, and the treatment was to make her even more powerless. And again, institutions unknowingly supported abuse, and the women, if they weren't mad at the time they went to an institution, they certainly were driven mad by the institution. I think that Bella asking the doctor also, I hope, what did she say? I hope you do not wish to reduce me to a state of stupefaction you achieved before. It shows that she's beginning to trust her own perception again, and we know that that is exactly with what Manningham cannot allow. I think that the symbolic meaning of this scene is that it represents something larger, that Bella is resisting three forces at once. She's resisting her husband being able to manipulate her. She is resisting the authority of medicine and also society's expectations of wives. What did she say? Something about the appearance, got to keep up appearances. And that's a heavy weight for one person. And that's why I think my throat is closing. My stomach is like, it's doing flips. It's just, this chapter was just so intense. One other thing struck me with the reading was that Bella actually stating to him, I'm tired of your tricks. She remembers very clearly where she placed the watch. She remembers putting it beside the bed. She remembers leaving the room briefly. And when she returns, it's gone. And what does he do? Well, we know that Bella's memory is working perfectly well. But he turns the moment into another accusation here. But also, for me, there was that Hamilton includes the bathroom detail deliberately, I think, because it's another layer. It's a tiny window of vulnerability. She's away from the room. So she knows someone entered the room. Was it him? Did he get Nancy to maybe do it? Someone could have entered. she knows, she said it, you have a key to the lock. And Bella's mind is beginning to connect a pattern. And I think if we thought that maybe, is she going crazy? I think that it's a piece of the puzzle that this might not be her memory, because she's telling him distinctively, I placed that watch beside my bed. I went to the bathroom, a moment of vulnerability, being out of the room. And in that time, someone came in, took that watch. She noticed that it was gone. And maybe she was armed already at breakfast. I don't think so, because he was throwing her off with the letter. Oh boy, what very, very, very tension, a lot of tension in this chapter, especially again around the dog. And I'm hoping that the puppy is some kind of foreshadowing into something important about who will eventually guard the truth inside the house, like Kerberos, the three-headed dog who guarded Hades. Wow. I mean, I didn't expect such a physical reaction. I don't know if I told you guys. Did I tell you in the last chapter? I don't know. Yeah, I think I did. Did I? I don't know. I don't remember, but I remember them going out to dine, Nancy going out to dine to a place called Gaddy's. And that was my aunt's place in the villas at the shore. I think I told you guys, or I might have just been writing down my notes. I can't remember. So I was like, oh my God, Gaddy's. My aunt's married name was Gatinola. Gatinola. So we all worked the shore restaurant. We all went to chime in and help during the summers. Aunt Mary was there, and my grandmother. I was there, my Uncle Joe. We always went to Gaddy's for dinner. We always went to my aunt's place for dinner in the villas. So I found it interesting. It kind of, maybe you'll probably hear me say when I'm reading, maybe I took a breath there. I'm telling you guys, I'm ready to go right into the next chapter, but I did want to get a few of these other little things that I noticed from chapter 13. I don't know if I could go back in my notes fast enough to tell you why chapter 13 was such a turning point, and the structural trick in Gaslight happens in chapter 13 with the outside witness. Belle's trapped inside as a victim, but then we see this structural change in the writing and in the play, and from Hamilton and Drummond, and why it's such a classic suspense formula that you see a lot, like in Sherlock Holmes. We saw it in Rebecca. The Woman in White also had an investigator that begins to piece things together. And yeah, I think I'm going to put that in maybe the next chapter or a separate. I don't think I have enough to just do like a separate commentary. I don't know. But I had a few other things, even with chapter 14, that I saw in the writing. And look at what's going on here. I have like a minute left. So what's going on here is we're coming to the end of Golden Christmas. Oh my gosh. And then you will see Sacred Heart on my desk, which I think is so appropriate for this closing play novel. She's so beautiful with the symbolism also in this one canvas here by Curtis Regovich. I need to go meditate. Thanks for joining me, guys. What clues have you discovered in here? You guys have a really sharp sense of discovering little hints also. So I would love to hear your thoughts. See you in the next one. Bye.